Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Who am I? Are you sure you want to know? The story of my life is not for the faint of heart. If someone said it was a happy little tale, if somebody told you I was just your average, ordinary guy, not a care in the world, somebody lied. Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to Flickin' Reel's Spider-Man Retrospective. This is our first episode into the Tobey-Verse. And with me, I have some of my very favorite people to discuss the Sam Raimi trilogy. And that is, of course, my good buddy, Scott Fox, and Allison Salamone. Welcome back to the channel. How's everyone doing today?
Hi, guys.
Doing good.
Great.
Excited to talk Tobey-Verse, like narrow it down. Tobey Maguire's trilogy of Spider-Man.
And
I have so many notes.
I'm glad one of us does. I have to out myself a little bit, and despite the fact I had this beautiful overlay graphic made by the one and only Sean Wingblade, I have spelled Toby incorrectly at least 6 times this morning before I finally started getting into the stream and setting things up, and I was like, wait, there's an E?
Oh no.
So I was fixing a lot of things this morning.
Sorry, at least Sean caught it.
I like that I'm Pastor Dad Fox right now. This is fun.
Yes, I am Allison Salamone, I think.
Yep,
that's close
just
enough.
like that.
All right,
Perfect.
perfect.
Great job.
Yes, just as I like that Allison and Scott have their respective Twitter handles under them. Oh,
Yes.
that's right.
There we go.
Well, perfect. Yeah, well, nobody's perfect.
It's all good.
You'll probably, I'll be honest, you'll probably find better content under Allison's Twitter because mine includes basically anything Jesse posts, I retweet as an original thought. And that's about it.
He's my retweeter. That is his job description.
Meanwhile,
I'm trying to get Flickin' Real exposure just by sharing everything.
Yeah, I'd say my most recent tweet was the fact that I ordered The Rock from Amazon while my husband simultaneously through our Amazon account ordered The Green Knight on these Black Friday Blu-ray deals that Amazon had, and both of them came at the exact same time. So really, which one of us has the better taste in movies is what it kind of goes down to. Probably him, because I'm here talking Tobey Maguire.
Yes. Hey, there's a lot. Tobey Maguire was the biggest star on the planet for a short window.
Well, remember,
in the early
winners
2000s.
go home with the prom queens.
Okay? That's the exact line, Jesse.
That's the G-rated version of it.
That's our appropriate version of it.
Anyways, for any of you guys that are returning to the channel or new to the channel, this is Flickin' Real. We are your home for news, reviews, and daily discourse. We have our Monday shows where we talk about general news and stuff. We got our Sunday speakeasies, which are kind of just the whatever show. And then we have right now on Thursdays our Hawkeye reviews. But what is a content channel if we are not constantly looking for more things to pump out? So we are in anticipation for No Way Home, going to do retrospective videos looking at the portrayals of all the different Spider-Man. So, we three are Spider fans, and we are going to be talking about how Peter is portrayed, how Spider-Man is portrayed, the suits, the villains, and their impact on Peter, line and quip delivery, because it's very important. You got to have your thwippy quippies, how the action looks, some of the themes that carry out throughout the movies, and then, we'll wrap it up with some closing thoughts. But most importantly, we want interaction from you guys. Tell us how you feel. And the first thing you can do outside of course, liking the video, is check out that poll. Let us know how you feel about Tobey, and I'd be curious to share that with everyone once we get some more votes in there. Are you guys ready to get into it?
Yes. Let's do it.
Well,
yeah.
And when Bonesaw is ready, that means that we are ready. So with that, let's get into it. Let's talk about one of our first topics, which is, over the course of these films, how do we feel about Tobey Maguire's portrayal of Peter Parker? Now, I know one of us has notes, so I was thinking of maybe going to that person while the rest of us think and do our best to just really wing it or wing blade it, whichever. Allison, do you have some thoughts on Tobey's Peter Parker?
It is probably my least favorite Peter Parker. And oh, Pat, you always know how to just knock me down a peg. I love it.
Pat, by the way, will be on our Hawkeye review show this coming Thursday, so look forward to that. And of course,
times.
Really quickly, just open up another tab. You don't have to close out of this one. Open up another tab and go subscribe to Montyverse. Some A-grade content.
It's fantastic.
Sorry.
No, you're good. It's my least favorite Peter Parker, and I guess we'll get more into it when we go into the pros and cons of it. I get the soft-spoken, the nerdiness of it. Given the time and what we were getting comic book movies wise, and it's kind of be a running theme with everything that I say. At least it comes across as a very by the book comic book portrayal almost. Except in this case, I feel like he's a little more whiny as a Peter Parker versus the other two that we've seen.
I thought he did a decent job as Peter Parker. I'm trying to avoid ranking him versus the other people, but it's really hard because Tobey set the bar for what we got as a Peter, and then we inevitably grade Andrew and Tom against Tobey. But if you're looking at Tobey and what we were expecting out of it, the only issue I really had is he wasn't the young high school aged Spider-Man. He went into a young adult Spider-Man really early. He kind of progressed really fast.
First movie.
Yeah, and he was more of a college student, Peter Parker, still a genius, which they hint to in both number 2 and 3. I do like the fact that they show some of the struggles of being a young adult, trying to figure out your way in the world, dealing with love matters, in 3 when he gets wrapped up in being Spider-Man and he makes the mistake of letting Gwen Stacy kiss him, and he can't conceive why that would piss off Mary Jane. When she's upset, he's like, what is going on right now? He's completely blindsided by the fact that she would be upset by him being.
I gotta be honest. I thought he sucked before he got the black suit in the 3rd movie.
Oh, really?
I think you're kind of awful.
No, yeah, totally. Yeah, he was very self-centered, and and Aunt May also points to the fact that as a husband, you have to put the other person ahead of yourself. And he even admits to himself later on in the movie that I can't do that. I'm not ready to do that. And so I liked some of it. It's really hard because I think they did as good a job as possible. But Tobey Maguire was also, gosh, he was darn near 30 when he took on the role.
I believe he was 28.
Yeah, and so for him to be taking on a 16, 17, maybe even 18-year-old, and granted they do that in movies all the time, but I guess for me they kind of flash forwarded too quickly past a younger Spider-Man, and some of his character development because of that felt kind of rushed in all the movies. But I do like him.
I am a 90s baby. I was born in 93. So the first Spider-Man film, I was 9 years old when it came out. So obviously that was my Spider-Man growing up outside of the 90s cartoon. And a lot of the things that bother me now didn't then. And it's kind of like how I feel about some of the Batman movies and the Dark Knight movies. When they came out, I was young enough that I was just like, Batman, this is perfect. And then as I delved more into comics in my adult life and other sources of media with these characters and stuff, I was like, actually, they could have done much better. And that's kind of how Tobey was. The organic web shooters now not only bother me, they disgust me. But I guess that's talking about the whole portrayal. Let's talk about Peter Parker. They got the awkwardness, but it definitely felt like a caricature of what a nerd would be. Which I feel like maybe in the following franchise they tried to overcorrect. So it didn't always work. And you want to get they're kind of geeky and nerdy, but also charming, so that when there's interactions with other characters, they're not painful to behold. And there's dialogue in this movie, all three of them, to varying degrees, that are painful. And I think the relationship didn't work, and a lot of that came from how Peter Parker was portrayed. And personally, I believe that Peter gets less likable as the films go on. I think he's at his best in the first movie. But I was rewatching the first couple with my wife, and she was like, he's creepy. Like, he's always lurking. He's looking through windows. He's taking pictures. He's saying things like under his
I don't appreciate that.
It's more than awkward. Like, I'm a geek, I'm a nerd, I'm socially awkward, but I don't define myself as being creepy. And so I think that it was a little lacking. The portrayal was a little bit lacking. I am excited to get into the Spider-Man conversation because I do feel a little bit more positive about his Spider-Man than I do his Peter Parker. But
and I think I disagree with you on which version of Peter in these films you like the best, because I actually preferred him and what he was doing as Peter in the second one versus the first one. Because again, you get back into that first one where he's lurking and taking the photos, and then he's standing in his window watching, MJ do, everyone who keeps thinking this is a good idea to put in movies of the guy just watching the woman from her window. It's not. I'm telling you right now.
He's admiring.
It's literally a movie version of the Clay Aiken song. If I was invisible, I would watch you in your room. It's
so
wait, what did he just say? How did this turn into a hit song?
He's like, I just want to be a spider on your wall.
Right. Terrible idea.
Well, and then moving on with Peter in the second movie, the way that I felt bad for Mary Jane because he keeps giving her all these signs. He's like, man, I'm so jealous of whoever you're with. I would do everything to be with you. And then he fights and fights and fights, and then she frees up time for him. And then he's like, no, I can't. I have all these responsibilities, and I don't want you to get hurt. And that he does it between 1 and 2. He does it 4 times. Yeah. And if I was Mary Jane, I would also be getting married. I'm like, get out of my life.
We're all
your
done.
Toxic, guilt-ridden BS. I don't want it. And so I really did think as the films got on, I felt like Peter was toxic. I was like, if Mary Jane was my friend and she was telling me about this guy, I'd stop talking to him. Yeah. He's the worst.
Now, again, some of this is also retrospective. We're in a different place 20 years removed or 19 years removed from the first Spider-Man movie, where, yeah, it's really creepy now. But back then, it was just kind of normal for guys to be a bit more on the, I guess, pardon my language, with the douchey side. And there are some moments where, his awkwardness and creepiness and some of the things he did really shined in a negative way, especially when you look back at it, you're like, oh, how was that socially acceptable? It's kind of like going through somebody's Twitter feed from 15 years earlier and finding some of their tweets and going, how did you say that?
There's so many things that I wouldn't have known how to react. He's like, are you kidding me? When you were Cinderella in the school play, I cried like a baby. I'd be like, okay.
Probably be something I would do. So, I kind of relate to him on that one with the everyone knowing how canon it is for Allison.
It's just, what a flirt. What a
What a
flirt.
flirt.
He is not smooth.
That's the term. That's the
And
term.
when he
I mean,
finally
what a
gets the
flirt.
confidence to try and be smooth, he's even less smooth.
Absolutely. Okay,
Until he gets
before
that black suit.
Yeah, oh, it's the black suit. Yeah, totally. And the emo hair. I just got to pull these last few strands over my face a little bit.
well, if you guys are going to bring it up, since we are talking about Peter Parker, I do have some real great images. And if you guys are just not convinced that Peter was not the best Spider-Man, I'm done trying to convince you. And I also have this great image here of him coming through the portals, a la Thanos in Infinity War. What a different movie that could have been.
This
Oh
is
my
the
goodness.
time where I was at my most emo. So
Yep.
I think
Allison.
I sent Jesse a few.
Oh my goodness.
There is Allison cosplaying as
There
Peter
it is.
Parker in Spider-Man 3.
There.
Right, that was
that was 2000 and that was actually like 2008, 2009.
19?
I
Okay, 2009.
No.
Is that
Yeah.
Georgia Bulldogs? Is that a
It is
Georgia
Go
Bulldog
Dogs.
sweater?
Dog.
Now-
Absolutely.
Iconic. What more
Everyone,
can you say?
you're welcome.
Yeah. I
Now,
was
what-
bald by the time these movies came out. So
What Scott doesn't know is I was actually able to do some hacking, and I went into the deep recesses
Oh
of
my goodness.
Scott's computer files and found this gem right here.
yes, dude, that is choice right there. That's emo. I smelled someone fart right there.
All right.
Where's my black
moving-
suit?
Just a reminder, guys, before we move on to our next topic, because we are going to talk about now his portrayal of Spider-Man, which, just like Bruce Wayne and Batman, they're two different things. Some actors
Totally.
do great at one and not the other. Some are a balance of both. But before we go in there, if you guys do want to add to the conversation or derail the conversation or, whichever, have an impact on it, or just support the show in general, above Scott, so it's that side, you see streamlabs.com/flickandreel. And we would love to read whatever you got to say over on there. And this takes hours and hours and hours and hours to set up, and I would rather not do it for 100% free. All right, with that, thank you. Also, Allison charges at least $50 an hour, so we
I
need.
wish. Really? Is that how much I can be paid? That's fun. And to answer Kaylee's question, yes, that was an OG pink Razor phone that I took that
Wow.
picture on.
That's old school.
That is.
Was that the
welcome.
Razor Flip?
Yeah. That was the OG Razor. That was back when like I really wanted to be cool. Well, I used to have a sidekick, but then I had to get on my own.
Oh, the sidekick was awesome. You flip it and you got the little keyboard on there.
It
All
was
right,
great.
we are
But
I'm old. Oh, there
talking
you
about
go.
this man right here as Spider-Man. And again, in the chat, please let us know what your feelings are. Let's see. Allison started the last one off. Scott, how do you feel Tobey did as Spider-Man?
I love Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, to be honest. I think he's at his best in number 2 as far as portraying Spider-Man. The only issue I have there is when because of the organic nature of his abilities, when he loses contact with being Spider-Man and kind of doesn't want it, his powers seem to fade. I wasn't the biggest fan of that portion of his character development, but I thought his portrayal as Spider-Man and his desperate desire to want to help literally everyone he can was outstanding. And one of my favorite scenes in it, and this is a lot of people will quote this one, but his battles with Doc Ock are awesome, especially when he's in the diner and Doc Ock throws the car through. And they have that initial interaction, but then he also has to save the train. And the moment when he's saving the train and, he realizes he can't just jam it with his foot because it's going to blow his knee out. He can't stop it any other way. So he just starts shooting webs everywhere that he can, holding on for dear life, is one of the coolest moments in any of the Spider-Man movies for me. I think his Spider-Man portrayal is actually pretty good. And that's, we're going to remove some of the CGI because it was also before CGI and some of the stuff got really good. And so there's some of it that may not look as crisp, but his portrayal as actual Spider-Man is great.
I'll be gentle on the effects.
Yeah.
That is not what we are here to critique. We are talking about writing, direction, portrayal.
I think his Spider-Man is really, really solid.
Mhm.
I enjoy him.
With jokes that age as greatly as, that's a nice outfit. Did your husband make it for you?
Yeah.
He's
problematic Spider-Man.
Yes. Again, 20-year-old Spider-Man versus today's day and age Spider-Man.
Right.
And I saw earlier, Buck in the chat was bringing up how great Tobey Maguire's theme was, because Danny Elfman, of course, but like I feel like you're missing
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can.
I love that they mix that song into the movies.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the
people
highlights.
sing it, with the random
Yes.
New Yorkers singing the song. That's great. It's
Yeah.
good stuff. Allison, what are your thoughts? And I didn't make it a topic, but like I also want to talk about how New York is used with Spider-Man, I think, in these movies, because each of them do it a bit differently. But thoughts on Spider-Toby?
I mean, I agree with Scott. I think I prefer his Spider-Man versus his Peter Parker. But also, and I've told you this, Jesse, it's lived in my head ever since a friend of mine called this trilogy the Seabiscuit Spider-Man because of the Tobey Maguire. A friend of mine said that to me years ago. So it constantly lives in my head rent free. So I think that also has an impact on how I view these films. But I prefer Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man much more than Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker. And I think, and it's almost like it was a choice in how Raimi did that too, because like I said, with the Peter Parker, we're getting this like, wimpy in a way, like how he kind of creeps on people and then it is a complete 180 shift in like his mentality and how he is and what he's doing when he's Spider-Man. And so I think that is why I prefer the Spider-Man over the Peter Parker. The Peter Parker annoys me, but the Spider-Man I can get behind.
And I agree with a lot with so much of both of you guys. And something I didn't realize, especially when watching the first film, is, we all have those top 5 movies. It's like, wow, once this starts, I can quote the entire movie. I didn't realize that was Spider-Man for me. Like, I started watching it and I was quoting everything that Willem Dafoe said, everything that Harry Osborn said, Uncle Ben, like just the whole gambit. I agree that his Spider-Man is superior to his Peter Parker, and I think that there's a lot of fun to be had. You can tell that he enjoys being Spider-Man. One of the things I hinted at the beginning of the show, which is I think kind of ironic, is that I think occasionally Sam Raimi doesn't really know how serious to take this property, because it starts out with a narration like they're trying to get an Academy Award, and then it gets really like grounded and gritty at that last fight with Goblin at the end of it. But then there's so much like cheesy, corny stuff in the middle of it that the tone does feel a bit inconsistent throughout, and that kind of carries through in this portrayal of Spider-Man himself. But I do like that he tries to be funny, but then you have lines like, "You're the one that's out, Gobby, out of your mind," and I was like, "Wow, this passed a writing room."
That literally sounds like
had to be approved. Like
that sounds like Robin Holy Rusted Bolts Batman type of dialogue from the 1960s TV show. That's
because it's all holy and rusted.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they're super cringy. And it's they did have to pass it. I feel like sometimes they slip things like that in there to do treatment or do a little bit of service to maybe fans from the comics who like a little bit of that stuff occasionally. But in the movie, it doesn't come across as natural. Like it's kind of like when you watch a movie and you're like, nobody in real life has conversations like this. Nobody in real life talks like that to other people. Like,
that's exactly what Lauren was saying. She's like, whoever wrote this script, I feel like, has never spoken to people. Like we were making references to The Room when we were watching it, and just like Tommy Wiseau dialogue.
Hold on, no offense to the writers' rooms, because we have a lot of writers who are friends of this channel, and we want to make sure we're
all
not
the offense.
Yeah, exactly. But there's some bad dialogue.
Yeah. No, there really is, and it's even like just bad. Not even just like with his dialogue, but like with the city of New York and the New Yorkers that are there, and we know that the New Yorkers, here's my issue about
one of us. You mess with all
Here's
of
my
us.
issue: is just an hour and a half before they all hated him. So it's like that's what the way that they get the whole entire city of New York to turn on a dime and then turn almost instantly again. I feel like that doesn't. It's not a good idea. It did not work for me. To like, I don't know. It just
But
it all just
in reality, though, that our culture is not far off of that. They will love somebody
right.
and then hate somebody on a turn of a dime. And the
It
problem
takes a
is,
Twitter post.
well, it takes a Twitter post, or it takes a villain who does something heroic to save people. Suddenly, everyone's back rallying behind them, and it's like, well, hey, you hated this dude just a minute ago,
Thanos did
and
nothing
vice
wrong.
versa. A hero can become a villain like that. I mean, it happens so fast where people who have a long history of doing really good things make a mistake, and they are then just absolutely squashed. So that portion, you can get mass mob mentality can be shifted sadly easier than it needs to be, usually for the negative, but you can turn it back around to the good, and Spider-Man saving people certainly can turn that back.
And there's several things in this movie, like we're talking about dialogue, that I can't tell if I love a line but it's bad, or if it's actually like, you know, a decently scripted line. Like, I die every time I see Flash Thompson go, yeah, I wouldn't want to fight me neither. Cracks me up every time I watch that movie. And then Willem Dafoe gets all the greatest lines. Joe
Okay.
Manganiello's supposed to be like an 18-year-old is
Yeah.
hilarious to me.
Again, all of these choices had to be approved by somebody, and him being an 18-year-old is one that it blows my mind. Blows my mind.
Because I rewatched Spider-Man 3 last night. At the very end, when Harry dies, and granted, Harry knew a lot of people randomly, and you never know who people are connected with. But at his funeral, Captain Stacy, Gwen Stacy, sneaking in the back is Flash Thompson. Joe Manganiello's in part 3 at the funeral at the very end, and it's just one of those things. Like, is this the Tony Stark funeral where every random character from the entire franchise sneaks back in? Like why was Flash there? I didn't think they got along at all. But
with that, we have to go back to formula, and we're talking about Spider-Man. No, you're fine. I want to bring up this topic as well. Let's talk about the action in the trilogy as well as the web swinging, because I feel like the web swinging itself is just as important as like New York as a character, because every rendition has done it differently, and we'll talk about what was kind of like the best and worst as we go through it. But granted, limited by the technology of its time.
Mm-hmm.
I felt the energy of the web swinging, but I didn't visually it was kind of like Superman 1978, right? It was the first time we'd seen a character fly. So everyone's like, you'll believe a man can fly. Absolutely. That's what I'm looking at. But again, we do retrospectives and we look back on it. And when I was 9 years old, I was like, he's swinging through webs. This is awesome. But I was also used to the animation of the 90s cartoon, which is like, eat. Like, there's not a lot of variety there, and I kind of felt like that's what this was. There wasn't a lot of energy in the motions, but you know, you could hear him screaming joyous and stuff. It's one of the things that didn't age well. Like, I'm not talking about it,
Right.
not that it doesn't look good, but it just feels kind of flat and stale. And we were talking before the show about he'd be walking and he'd shoot a web up, and then the web would just pull him up like a grappling hook, and I was like, that's not how physics work.
That's not how we do this. No, I agree. I think some of the actions, especially in 2 with Doc Ock and how he's, you know, Alfred Molina, and just how he's like the stuff that he's throwing at Spider-Man and how those fights are going. I think, again, given what they've had to do with what they had with the CGI, it's a little bit more believable in that one than I think in the other 2 with the action that's been going on. So I think you're limited by what your resources are, but and Jesse here talking about how he was 9 years old. I was born in 1986, so I was, you know, a few more years older when these ones came out, and I wasn't as into the comic book movies, I could say, at this time, as I am now in my mid 30s. But yeah, no, I think you do the best with what you have, and I think he does a really good job with kind of the movement when it comes to the swinging, where it's not making you feel sick while watching it, because motion sickness is not fun.
No, it is not. This kind of Jesse talked on it. Something that bothers me is movie physics. And again, everybody has something else, and I can suspend reality and still just believe it. And back when this first came out, we didn't have anything to compare it to, so we look at the other ones differently. But even in this, number 2, I think, is the peak of where his movement with the webs and where everything works is much better. Of course, the first movie did, I think, globally like 400, or in the United States like 430 million or something like that. Their budget got better for the second one.
Yeah.
And so it looks much better. His movement's much better. He doesn't have as many of the random pulls where he shoots and it launches him off without him having to actually put torque on the line to be able to get pulled.
Really quick, good sir. Worldwide, the first Spider-Man made $821 million in 2002.
But how much domestically? I think that was like 400.
Yeah, that was worldwide. Let me see. I'll get back to you on that.
403. I just found it. 403.
All right, quickie guy.
Sorry.
So you were right. I'm sorry for the correction. I will see myself out.
No.
But also,
yeah, no, you're fine. You're fine. But still, that global amount of dollars gives them more money and to do better effects. Also, 2 years later, and we know back then, after the Matrix, technology for action stuff was making leaps and bounds. Right, the Wachowskis and what they did with the Matrix movies in the 1999. With the bullet vision, all these different things they invented in order to improve the CG or the visuals, that was all being gobbled up by everybody and using it. And so by 2004, in the second movie, they had better tech to work with in the same way that now we have stuff that blows that out of the water. What's weird is that by number 3, they went backwards. It's almost like they didn't care about the finished product as much. Like they knew that it was not going to be the same level of
movie.
With
the exception of the Sandman transition.
Yeah.
Sandman is amazing. He's the brightest spot of that entire movie. Other than I do like the look of Black Suit Spider-Man. I maybe don't like the attitude of Black Suit Spider-Man, but I do like the look of Black Suit Spider-Man. But the second movie, really, as far as the web swinging and action, is great. I will say one of my things I love about Tobey Maguire is his not when he's swinging, is when he's scaling walls. His grip, the way he spider crawls across things, looks outstanding. Specifically in the third one, when Harry pulls a chunk of wall off and throws it down, and he has to crawl around it as it's falling through the sky, looks awesome. Some of those things, his movement as Spider-Man not swinging is really good. So his action outside of the web slinging is what I'm saying.
Well,
but I also I think back too, and when you're looking at 2004 and the action and what the technology they're using, that was the same year that Hellboy 2004 came out, that had phenomenal practical effects and everything going on with it. So it's kind of one of those things where it's at such a, I feel like movies itself in this kind of genre come at like a crossroad between having to use the CGI versus these practical effects.
Well,
you have
a
Hellboy.
great example of that is the last 2 Blade movies. They were at that transition where they didn't know like whether to lean on CGI or lean on practical. I think they leaned too much on CGI. But you're right. Hellboy's fantastic. You're speaking to my heart. That's one of my top 5 comic book movies. Go ahead.
That was in my notes. I had that in my notes. I wrote down all the comic book movies that came out in those early 2000s to compare it to, because that's what you have. Because before the first Spider-Man, you have X-Men, right, which came out, and I thought that one was. I would probably say that was one of my first comic book movies I ever saw and really enjoyed. As like I want to say I was like, what was that, 2000? So I'd be like 12 or 13 when that one came out. So you look at, but then of course, then you get Blade 2 with Spider-Man. So those are your comparisons in 2002 when those 2 movies came out.
Well, you could also put the Matrix. So we're talking about the CGI going back and forth. The first Matrix movie, all practical effects, all done with camera work and really well done. And then
wire
Matrix
work and
2,
everything. Yeah.
Matrix 2, they leaned heavily on CGI. And the problem is back then, it wasn't like the difference between CGI and live action was so stark that it was shocking. And when you lean too heavy on CGI in number 3 especially, it's you can tell you like that's not a guy, that's a computer. That's not a guy, that's a computer. In the same way that the first Matrix is amazing, second Matrix you're like this whole scene is just computers. There's no actual people doing any of this junk.
We're talking about CGI. Doc Ock's arms are more often than not practically there. Like
they were puppets. I saw a
And you
thing.
can tell the difference. I feel like you can tell like just the quality of it when you have the practical Ock arms versus all of that CGI, and when it's all happening almost at the same time. Sometimes you're just like it. I feel like it just ends up throwing some things off for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. If you can ever get away with them, practical effects are the way to go.
Mhm.
Much more expensive
With
and time consuming.
Talking about Doc Ock, I think that's a good transition to let's talk about, a hero is only ever as good as their villains, and we have such characters as Green Goblin, Sandman, Venom, New Goblin, Doc Ock, and a lot of these movies are made up with how Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man interacts with the villains. So this is one of the times where I kind of want to maybe go a bit like movie by movie a little bit and talk about the first movie, Green Goblin. What an outfit! It's been compared to Power Rangers villains, and I can't disagree. But
Yeah.
the casting still phenomenal. I think all my favorite movies in the first movie have to do with Willem Dafoe. Misery, misery, misery. That's what you.
The William Dafoe aspect of the first one is probably my favorite over, Spider-Man and, Peter Parker. I think that casting specifically is my favorite. My least favorite is James Franco, but we can get into that later. But definitely the William Dafoe of it all, and because he's just so good, and I feel like he's just so good in almost pretty much everything he does. And how else could you play such a character that's supposed to be like a little creepy? And I don't think you could have put anyone else in that position and do it as well as he did.
Willem Dafoe is the gift that keeps on giving, because now he's he will live forever in meme glory, as I'm a bit of a scientist myself, Peter, which has been used for literally everything.
I was laughing the entire time watching the first movie. Is Lauren and I kept pointing to the screen going, meme.
Oh my God, they're everywhere.
The Tobey crying meme. I'm like, oh yeah, that's where that came from. Now I remember.
They're so good. But Willem Dafoe is he's a top tier actor. And it doesn't matter what you give him, he's bringing everything he has into every role, and he is great as Norman Osborn. Like there's no debating that. Now Green Goblin, I love how Green Goblin is played. The look is just a little weird. And I'm not going to poo-poo the look completely, but I think Willem Dafoe playing the Green Goblin was great. Do I think they could have picked a better mask? Sure. A better suit? Maybe. But his
I do agree with Jeremy though. Despite like all the jokes and prods at the suit, like seeing it in the No Way Home trailer show up, you can't not feel it in the nostalgia bones.
So then I don't want to. I'll get off on a tangent about the new one, because then there's the new Goblin look like with the hood over an exposed face. Is that the Harry Osborn from the third or from Amazing Spider-Man?
If you zoom in, it is Willem Dafoe in that poster that just came out. You can tell.
Okay. Well, I was just watching the short little clip, but either way, we can talk No Way Home all day long. But the suit is not terrible to me. When I first watched it, I was like, all right, that works. It's only in retrospective, looking back and comparing it to stuff, that you kind of poo-poo it. But
you start getting all the
Dafoe,
MCU villain stuff, and so you look back, of course, at early 2000s. But
again, we're talking 20 years ago now. I mean, it just
the
ideas are just different.
This movie is now just
in May. It'll be 20 years.
Yeah,
and on top of all of that, when you think about it too, and the evolution of the comic book movie is even looking at the first Avengers and the comic book look they were going for. So really, even though we can poo-poo on the suit, if you're thinking about it in the sense of like they were trying to do more of a fan service for giving a good comic book movie, it almost makes sense for it to look that way. And then as we've evolved and as we've all gotten spoiled by MCU over Marvel, and these movies, then we start getting these different kind of appearances. But even like the look from the first Avengers to where they finished at Endgame, those looks have gone from being super by the book comic booky to,
and that's like half
look
the time.
at Captain America's transition between all of his different suits. Which, by the way, I love the first movie best.
Sean making an excellent point. There's a reason they call him Willem Dafoe, because he plays a great bad guy.
Wow. Boom. He'll be here all
Great.
week, ladies and gentlemen.
Clearly a dad. Clearly
Now,
a dad.
in the first
Love
movie,
a good
before we
dad
move
joke.
on from Green Goblin, I do want to say there's another villain in this movie, and we saw a little clip of him, but Bone Crusher is an early villain in this movie.
Bonesaw.
Oh,
Bonesaw.
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 Yeah.
Yes.
Respect the name.
The macho, the fact that he gets Gotta love Macho Man. That's
I
the
love him.
best.
R.I.P. R.I.P.
Hey, freak show! You're going nowhere.
Nicely done.
I love it. Good job, Jesse. You got you a little parse after that one. That would get you a little bit.
Yeah, I'm out of water. Too many Bonesaw impersonations.
Yeah.
Dude, somebody is like making these memes of like the invisible character that punches Lizard in the trailer, and it's Bonesaw with a chair. Hey,
No.
freak show!
I saw one with Flash.
Hey.
Flash Thompson cracking him. Like
I wouldn't
right
want
here,
to fight
buddy.
me neither.
Oh,
Yeah,
good
so but if we that's really the only villains in the first movie. The second
Well, I think the
movie
main
shows-
villain of Spider-Man
clearly.
1 is consequence
Yeah.
of your actions.
Wow.
It's Aesop's fable right here.
Holy mackerel. We're teaching stories to kids. We're instilling morals and lessons.
Exactly what
Listen,
we're doing.
I
what we're here
rewatching
for.
that. I'm like, I would have let the robber go too. That guy sucked. Like,
Yeah, no,
I know.
and
Looking back, you're like, oh no, I'm a terrible person. But I'm like, I would have done. Like, I know it's supposed to be a lesson, but I'm letting that guy go too.
But
Can I
also
just-
shoulda, coulda, woulda. We can Monday morning quarterback any choice that we make in life. Like,
Oh, totally.
I could have chosen to never watch a single Schmodown episode, and then I wouldn't even be here. So probably never should have watched the Schmodown. I'm just kidding.
Yes. You'd have had more
Just
free
kidding.
time.
Instead of planning my day around.
I don't want to jump around too much, but that's one of my biggest frustrations with the third movie is the rehash of Uncle Ben's death and the changing of who was guilty of it. Instead of doing something else for Sandman's backstory, to dip to the for Flint Marko, like instead of going back and changing who actually killed Uncle Ben, do something else to instill that in the story. But it felt like, okay, I don't know, a way to bridge all three movies, but it seemed like it seemed cheap.
A little
to me.
bit of a stretch. Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's kind of, yeah. It comes into like this whole, again, that whole Monday morning quarterback. Like if I was in Tobey's position and I didn't get my money because I didn't stay for the full 3 minutes, I'd have been like, oh, well, sucks to
Let's
suck,
talk about the
bro.
disparaging difference. It was like, what was it, $3,000 for 3 minutes? It's like you pinned him in two. So for that, you get 100. I'm like, that doesn't line up at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it becomes like, and then of course we know what ends up happening in that sense, but at the same time, and two, when he's talking with Aunt May about it, and he's like telling her the truth. And so
I have to
she's
say,
like,
that was a very well handled moment because they could have very easily been like, it's okay, Peter, I forgive you. And she like takes her hand away and walks away. And I was like, good. It's good for you.
That's why number two has some of the best heart moments where emotionally you can connect a little bit more. Even with Alfred Molina as Doc Ock towards the end of the movie, recognizing that he's making a mistake in what he's doing and he's gone too far. And Alfred Molina as Doc Ock is one of the best villains of the whole, is, in my opinion, the best villain of the whole trilogy.
there's a reason why they have him showing up in the No Way Home trailers.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because he's one of for many, the most beloved villain. And really, if you kind of think about it with how 2 ends, the actual hero in that film with what he does to help, so I also put this in I love the entire, because one of the people that I talk to like try to understand what I'm supposed to like about 2 is good old IG competitor Robert Parker himself. Just to kind of like, why am I supposed to love this movie so much? Like, what is it about this film? And it makes sense because when you really look at it and you look at the actual hero's journey and what it means to go on a hero's journey, it's very literal and by the book, especially in number 2, with the consequence, with the problems he faces, where he has to make the choices that he makes, things like that. But really, when you spin it back over to Alfred Molina, it's almost like he's actually the one that's really making that journey to come full circle at the end, to be the real hero in all of it. for sure. So I vote Alfred Molina as best bad guy, but also best hero as
Well, the great thing is,
Spider-Man trilogy.
at the beginning of that movie, he's also a mentor. He's wanting to take Peter under his wing, teach him,
Mhm.
get him engaged. He knows that Peter's a genius, and he's
Genius,
also
but lazy.
his intention with creating the suit and the arms is to help improve technology, mobility, all these different things.
To give us limitless energy.
Totally,
Mhm.
and that's he was doing a lot of things for the right reason. He got a little bit corrupted when it started to control his mind a little bit, but and I guess that was Peter's job in the whole movie, was to remind Dr. Octavius of who he was, so that he didn't lose that in this attempt to achieve something. But you're right. The real story arc is how Dr. Octavius goes way off the rails and then has to bring it back. But the action sequences in number 2 on the train when they're fighting in
Mhm.
the city, the way he walks around just grabbing parts of buildings and clinging to them and moving, he looks amazing. Absolutely amazing.
I love that, like, Alfred Molina himself doesn't give off a very like visually imposing aura about him, but the
Mhm.
character is able to still be threatening and be imposing because of the presence, because of the acting and the realization of the arms and things. So I love that, like, at first it seems like unconventional casting, but Doc Ock is an unconventional villain.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that the two uniquenesses, they were able to blend very well.
Okay, so my kids hadn't seen these ones, and they had only seen Into the Spider-Verse. They hadn't seen the really old Spider-Man. And when Alfred Molina is Doc Ock, they're like, I thought Doc Ock was a lady. And I'm like, that's in the Spider-Verse. Like, in the real one, it's Dr. Otto Octavius, and
so they missed out. They missed out one of the great moments of Into the Spider-Verse. It's like,
yeah,
they didn't.
Do your friends call you Doc Ock? Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the when watching Into the Spider-Verse, I'm like, oh, that's a great twist on this character.
This is the most Sam Raimi moment in the entire trilogy. He's like, I'm gonna do some Evil Dead.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. When they're trying to remove the suit and the suit kills everybody.
Yes.
It's again,
100%.
Doc Ock is and the reason why I feel like the number 2 is the anchor movie. And if you look at the scores across the board, it really is the best rated and best reviewed movie of the trilogy. It's because of Alfred Molina and the way he handled that character, and the relationships, and the relationship between Peter and Mary Jane grows in that movie too. But really, Doc Ock he makes the whole thing.
I think this is going to be the fastest I lose subscribers, but I'm going to make a comparison here. And it is, for me, the entirety of the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi trilogy is very one-for-one the Dark Knight trilogy. The Batman Begins is my favorite of the Dark Knight trilogy because it feels the most Batman-y, like most Batman-focused. Mm-hmm. However, I feel like the Dark Knight has the strongest villain. But I feel like a lot of people claim that Dark Knight is the strongest film because of how strong the central villain was. And it's one of those things where if you take that out and look around it, there's a lot of things that don't quite line up, don't quite work. You start seeing more of the flaws, but you're blinded by your passion for like this villain that's portrayed so well and steals the show. And I feel like that very much through this. And then we all agree that Spider-Man 3 and Dark Knight Rises are pretty ass. I think
one
that's
of the
consensus.
I actually really like Dark Knight Rises.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry. I will not speak for everyone.
I enjoyed Dark Knight Rises, but I will say this about the Dark Knight: 40 minutes too long.
Yeah.
At least Spider-Man 2 didn't add 40 minutes or I had a full arc of a movie and then I decided to restart a third act that I thought was over. It literally felt like Lord of the Rings, where it's over, you have a finish, and then, like, by the way, we still have to tell the going home story. And
Spider-Man did not overstay its welcome. The only thing that overstayed its welcome was the soap opera of Mary Jane and Peter.
Yes. 100%. That soap opera.
Romance is the true villain of the Sam Raimi franchise. Okay, let's roll into Spider-Man 3. Let's roll into Spider-Man 3. We got where the whole reason people say watch how many villains you put in a movie came from this movie, which I think it's a little bit malarkey because it can be handled well. Just like people are like, oh, you can't have too many characters. Guardians of the Galaxy came out of the gate with like 6 main characters, and they're all great. So it's doable. What do we got?
Brandon's comment, Foreman. Topher Grace cast as Eddie Brock is a big whiff.
It was, again, choices. They also then had to go and dye his hair for whatever reason. It
didn't need to be done.
Did not need to be done. They had to
Eddie
then
Brock
give
is
him,
supposed to be like a football player.
And then with when I think especially now that we have a Tom Hardy Eddie Brock, it's like, and granted, I haven't seen the second Venom movie. I didn't hate the first one. I thought it was fun. And I love Tom Hardy. So I think like if that's the character you're going with, if that's what you're looking for, that's what fulfills
Tom
that.
Hardy was a good pick for Eddie Brock. Like he's supposed to be he's a bulkier guy.
Yeah.
And you've got like the scrawniest guy on television.
Right. That's supposed to be like this cool. I guess the whole reason they went with it is because he and Tobey Maguire kind of look alike. And I guess you're trying to get like the polar opposite of, again, it's going back to these like super literal ideas of things, right? You want the polar opposite of, Tobey Maguire and Peter Parker. So you get someone who looks like him, as in Topher Grace, I guess, and give him a bad dye job. And then when he turns into Venom, really bad teeth. I don't and now he has this unnecessary lisp when he talks that he's trying so hard not to have, and they're trying to edit and post as much as they can, but you can't because those teeth were a choice that you put in there, and it was a bad one.
So I can't tell on his hair if it was supposed to be dyed brown or blonde and came out orange, but that's what happened in between. It's the in-between box dye that you get. And
as a woman with brown hair who has put blonde in her hair that was dumb to do, that is exactly what happened. And I got made fun of by my stylist when I went to go get it, by a stylist when I went to go get it fixed, that asked me, why did I go with the orange? So what you were saying is exactly what happened to Topher Grace.
So you're saying more or less hair was one of the villains of the movie?
Yes. Such a good picture, Jesse. So good.
That's all natural.
Yeah, natural. That's the word for it.
Well, what's not natural is everything about Spider-Man 3.
The frustration with Spider-Man. Oh, hold on a second. So I did find it in my wallet. Let's see if this comes into focus.
Oh, wow.
That is circa 1999, baby.
Hang on.
Blonde hair. Yes. Look at that youthful young man. Let me get that in a little bit.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Oh my!
Yep.
Are those? Is your hair frosted? Because I feel like
no. What I did is I bleached it completely, and then that was about a month worth of grow out. So it had the nice two-tone look. 1999. I was also 40 pounds lighter. But anyways,
also why you're bald now, it's fine.
Oh no, totally. I scorched my scalp tons. But you know what? Actually, I can look at all my grandparents, aunts, or my uncles, and everything.
Co-host.
And this right here, this is a combination of dye and genetics, is why it's like that. But the Eddie Brock character, I felt like didn't have no good background, no nothing to him. There was no character development.
Shows up.
He just shows up. He is what he is. He's a sleazeball. You get that with every moment of his character development. The one that I wanted a lot more of, Harry, we got 3 movies of build-up for Harry. So we had plenty of character development
Which was really a disappointing payoff. I remember as young as I was when that movie came out, you spent like 3 movies waiting for Harry to be like the Goblin. And it's not
seriously,
great.
When he slams Mary Jane into the wall and says, if you want Peter to live, you're going to do this for me. And you know exactly what's going to happen. And it's just like, I thought to myself, I'm like, she's not superhuman. If he slammed her through a wall like that, she'd have most likely died.
Right.
But anyways,
movie physics.
I was disappointed with, I think they did a really good job. Thomas Hayden Church is a fantastic actor.
That's honestly the best really Sandman's ever been. Flint Marko is a one-note villain, and they gave him some depth.
And but I wanted more. But even what they gave, the little bit that he got, his character development was even better. And it really did pay off at the end when he apologized and he confessed what actually happened and that Uncle Ben was trying to stop him. Mm-hmm. And the gun went off by mistake. He still killed him, but it went off by mistake. Those moments were good. it was better on Thomas Hayden Church's side. Tobey Maguire's side, this is one of the moments where his Peter really sucked because it was super forced emotion and it didn't like hit. Emotional beats in a movie can feel really natural and like, man, that was really good. And then someone like they're trying to make me cry in a moment when I should have, but I'm not because they didn't do it right.
Mhm.
That was the moment at the end of the movie, except for Thomas Hayden Church. I believed it. I didn't on Toby's side, which was sad. But Flint Marco's character development, even as brief as it was better than either of the other two villains in the third movie. And Sandman is just they did so well with him when he starts sucking up all the sand and making himself giant. On point.
So good.
Which it looks like we might get a little bit more of something like that in No Way Home.
I just hope it's Thomas Hayden Church.
I don't know. That big sand nose, I don't think matches Thomas Hayden Church's, but we'll see.
We'll see. We
It's
see.
called Campia.
Yeah. I love when he just turns into a giant litter box, essentially. And there's also that
It's
great
so
moment.
unfortunate.
I was going to say of J. Jonah Jameson buying the camera off the little girl. He's
With
like, there's no film in
oh
here.
my gosh.
He's like,
Yeah.
she didn't. That'll be another
Yeah.
5 times what it was.
Well, and you want to talk about an underlying villain in a movie. Like he's always in the background just trying to stir crap up because he never cares about the good things that are happening. He wants dirt on people so that he can sell sleazy
He wants to put
magazines.
some dirt in your eye.
But I also
Yeah.
loved in 2 where you kind of get this like where he's realizing the city is going to hell without Spider-Man, and he's like, you're right, we need Spider-Man. Let's run whatever. And then all of a sudden, like the suit gets stolen. He's like, he stole my suit, and he starts going, he's a menace. And, like just goes right back to like classic J. Jonah Jameson. Which, by the way, again, we're talking about great casting. We talked about like Defoe, we got Melina. J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson is the best.
He
J.
is
Jonah
the
Jameson.
character.
That's why they did it.
Yeah, it's
I got to
amazing.
bring up Brandon. He says, would you have wanted Spider-Man 4 with Kingsley's Vulture? It was actually John Malkovich that they had casted for the role. And then Bruce Campbell was going to make a cameo appearance as Mysterio.
Oh,
Which, if
interesting.
we're doing a post
Bruce Campbell
scene that
in
like
every
ties-
movie has scene stealer.
because Sam Raimi is doing Multiverse of Madness, and I assume that No Way Home is going to tie into Multiverse of Madness. I need, because it would tie in from like Far From Home, I need Bruce Campbell to show up as Quentin Beck in the post-credit scene for No Way Home. Thank you and good night.
I don't even care if
And
it's
we
Quentin
sign
Beck.
off on that.
I just need Bruce Campbell in the movie somewhere. His little cameos in the movies are some of the best parts of the movies. I don't want to say they're on par with Stan Lee, but in the original Spider-Man trilogy, Bruce Campbell, he's just so good in his little parts as the host in the human spider? No, Spider-Man. Yeah, he gave him his name. But also as the concierge or the host at the French restaurant, where he's trying to do the help Peter propose. Like his bits in all 3 movies are really spot on. Bruce Campbell is a gem and should be in as much stuff as possible. And if it is, whether it's Quentin Beck or anything else, if they can squeeze him in any way, shape, or form, it's total fan treatment. And I will be overwhelmed happy.
I mean, just again, small tangent, but the Bruce Campbell appearance in Escape from LA is one of my favorite of all time. But back to Spider-Man.
Okay, so we talked about Venom, we talked about Sandman. We at first talked a little bit about Harry, but I don't want to get into that because I feel like his story is kind of the core of the film because it's throughout. We see him hold Mary Jane against Peter, and he's trying to psychologically attack Peter once he gets his memory back.
Mm-hmm.
I still actually kind of enjoy the scene of Peter's kind of being a dick, but then like Harry tries to throw a pumpkin bomb at him and he like webs it and throws it back and it blows up in his face. Very akin to the pumpkin bomb blowing up in Tobey's face in the first movie. And then we get them all scarred. Or wait, yeah, that's in 3, right? When he's all scarred up. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, at the very end. Here's my thing with James Franco is above all, and I have the same issue with his brother. And I told this to many of people. I just don't like his face, like,
which is why he's the perfect Tommy Wiseau.
I just want to punch it for what I don't know what it is, but like that there's just like people you have that you just see that you're just like, oh, that's a punchable face. That is James Franco for me. And then you have this, and you have this whole like lead up to him becoming New Goblin, and then he's New Goblin for like 30 minutes, and then it's almost like what they tried to do with Alfred Molina at the end of Spider-Man 2, where like, they make him the good guy again. But for me in this one, it didn't quite work because I think it was too fast into now I have all the technology and I'm going to try to kill you and we're going to do, and then all of a sudden for whatever reason he's now like, oh, we're friends again, it's fine.
Yeah, instead of hitting Venom in the side and knocking him sideways, he just throws himself in front to be stabbed as the sacrifice play, which I get they're trying to have that connection there, but at the same time, he could have done a lot of other things. He does have the superhuman treatment that his father got too. He could have helped stand his ground against Venom, but nope, I'm just going to throw myself in front of this blade instead of, catching it, pushing it sideways, hitting Venom.
Yeah.
500 other options.
Yeah. We're just going to end this the exact same way we ended the first one.
And totally. His arc followed the same thing as his father's.
And it was definitely very rushed that he's, he remembers like, oh yeah, Peter's my friend. He's like, hey buddy, I got you, buddy. We're okay, friend, pal, buddy of mine. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
Your face.
You're talking about cheesy dialogue that doesn't really fit when Sandman's trying to hit him and he sweeps in and Peter's saving Mary Jane. He's like, hey, am I interrupting? And then turns around to fight Sandman again. It's like, like that. Oh, that's really awkward.
And it's not even that it was that, and it's not even that like that it was Peter's friendship that turned James Franco back. It was being told from a report that the stab wounds his father received were the butler
reveals.
Yeah, the butler has to tell that it was that it matched up with the coroner's report of like what was on the thing. So it's not even like he had this whole epiphany of, oh, we're friends, Peter, I shouldn't be fighting you. It's oh, you know what? Yeah. The whole thing that we've been trying to say from the beginning is like, oh, you were right. I had needed my butler to tell me what the
can we talk about Bernard or whatever his butler's name is?
Bernard.
And he's like, oh yeah, the wounds were from your father's glider. I'm like, you were gonna tell me when? And I just Allison, I agree with so much of what you're saying, but I don't understand how you can look at this and tell me it's a punchable face. I mean,
that's exactly it right there. Now. It's that right there. Right there.
Is that it?
If I didn't like my laptop so much, I would have punched the screen. I almost did. I'm not even gonna lie. We got real close.
He's super cringy in that moment, and how Peter didn't realize he was being played right there. He's told that James Franco or Harry tells him that he's the other man, and then when he walks out, he gives him this really awkward wink, and then he vanishes. Like Peter should have known something was up. His spider senses are trash in the third movie. He can't read anybody or anything.
I brought it.
His Peter Tingle.
My spider sense is tingling.
Yeah.
If you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, dude. So many lines are really bad.
So cringe. It's so cringe. Terrible.
All right.
Which is so unfortunate because Sandman had such a good story. Like it was such a good story with Sandman, and then I feel like that whole and then everything, every other decision made in that movie ruins the rest of it. Just ruins it all.
Okay, so we can move on from villains now and go into our final topic, which kind of just deals with the franchise in its entirety. And that's themes. How do we feel like the themes that are important to Spider-Man were handled in the trilogy? Obviously the main one being with great power comes great responsibility. Was it consistent? Is there any other themes that you picked up on? Things that were done well, things that's enforced? Allison, you have so many notes. Would you care to start us off again?
I do have so many notes. I think with so many notes, I wish I could show you guys my notes. It's wild. But when it comes to the idea of that whole, like with great power, if that's the first theme, that's the big overarching thing. I think with great power comes great responsibility is most prevalent in 2. I think because he's trying to balance everything life is throwing at him, and he's not doing a very good job with it, while also trying to be Spider-Man. And in a sense, that's why it's almost like that's why everyone's turning on him, right? Because he's also, not only is he being a bad Peter Parker, but he's being a bad Spider-Man, and and you have to figure it out. And then you have that scene where he flashes to when he starts losing his power. That's probably one of the other issues. I hate movies where superheroes don't have their powers. Like
Thor.
That drives me nuts. Thor, in Avengers Infinity War, when Bruce Banner can't become Hulk again.
When
like
he gets
that,
gamma ED.
yeah. Yes. That's always been one of my biggest pet peeves in superhero movies. Like, you have these powers, you should be able to use them. Like, period, end of story. I don't care if it's character building. Tell me I'm wrong and never bring me back on again. It's fine. I hate it. It drives me nuts. So that part I wasn't a fan of. But when he's having that moment with Uncle Ben, when he's deciding to not be Spider-Man anymore, which is not what I think Uncle Ben was trying to get him to do in like that dream he's having, that's when he's like, he takes it away, and then again learns that you can't have everything you want. You're gonna have to put in some work, homie. Like, nothing is gonna be given to you.
We choose to be. So choose.
Exactly. And you can do both. You just have to figure out how to balance it, so that it, just like with everything in life, like, you just got to figure it out. And it's almost like he spent the whole movie wanting it figured out for him, how to do this great power, great responsibility. And then it all goes out the window in number 3, because number 3 was trash.
Number 3, he's like, how about backhanding my girlfriend? That's a great use
That's
of my...
great. Let me also, and well, I mean, technically then, if you think about it, and I can't believe I'm kind of defending it, but like that whole idea of great power, then he gets the symbiotic suit, and now he has too much power, and he starts letting it get to his head, and it starts messing with him, and it's like, well, now you've gone the complete opposite of where we were supposed to go. And emo Peter Parker dancing outside of the suit shop will forever live rent free in my mind because of that movie.
Yeah. Scott Fox.
So an overarching theme in every superhero movie is the sacrificial savior, right? I'm a pastor. And so the savior narrative has been one that is tapped into for movie after movie, story after story. It is a long running, especially in movies, kind of a trope, right? But in these series, the sacrificial savior has been everybody other than Peter. Everyone else died. We already touched about Alfred Molina. We touched about James Franco or Harry Osborn dying in order to save somebody. And I love that they play on this, but the only one that hit was Alfred Molina's. The other ones, Norman Osborn kills himself on accident. Harry dies sacrificially, and it's just one of these themes that runs in all movies, and you're always looking for it. The father who will do anything for his children. We get that with Sandman. There's some really, really good story themes, but I feel like the good work done in 1 and 2 mishit in 3. To echo Allison, is the sad thing is that movie deserved better.
Yeah.
And it should have had a 4th. They were so close to making it, which
they
maybe
could have brought us back. Yeah,
they could have brought it all back.
If it was like 1 and 2 were pretty good, 3 was a miss, and then 4 was good again, we would look very fondly back on this instead of having the sour taste that we do. I have to go on a slight diatribe because you're talking about the villains and like their endings and stuff. Allison calls it the Seabiscuit Spider Trilogy. For me, it's the Suicide Spider Trilogy because Goblin killed himself with the glider. Doc Ock threw himself into the ocean. Harry Osborn jumped in front of a metal spear, and Eddie Brock jumped on a grenade. What did Spider-Man do?
Nothing. He didn't do a dang thing.
No, Spider-Man did the old loop back where he got the villains' weapons to shoot back at themselves.
Well, yeah, and Doctor Strange in No Way Home.
That's what he did. He saved a train. He kept saving Mary Jane because she kept getting in these crazy predicaments. And then he saved children on the High Line. And Gwen Stacy.
And I have to comment on the themes because we're talking about, the sacrificial savior and making the sacrifices and things. It would have worked much better for me if it wasn't always between like Judy and Mary Jane. Make it between something else. Like, you can have that once because, yeah, relationships are something he has to choose between, but he also has to choose between, like, how he supports his Aunt May. He has to choose between school, which they hinted at a little bit. But for the most part, I felt throughout the trilogy, it is like, do you want to be Spider-Man or do you want to be in a relationship with Mary Jane? And that gets tired after one movie.
And it drives me nuts. One of my even biggest complaints about 2 is the ending where, like, she shows up, she left her wedding, and it's supposed to be this whole, and she's like, go get him, Tiger. And so he webs out the window, and then she
please
stares
bring up
off.
the meteor that we were talking about.
We'll get there too. Yeah. But she stares like forlornly out the window, like she's not proud of him, like she's not excited for him, that she's like, this is what we're doing now, like now I know what's happening, like we're gonna be okay. Like she stares like she's upset that she's gotten herself into this. And it's like, but you could have just gotten married and not done this to yourself. And then yes, in Spider-Man 3, he makes a little web for them to lay in, and they start making out, and then a meteor hits with the symbiote like 45 feet away.
Can I also say that's the softest a meteor's ever landed on Earth?
Explosion. Like,
yeah, a rock this big, by the way, if it's a meteor or rock this big, it leaves a crater.
Right. But it also
again, movie
exploded.
Physics.
Like there was an explosion. Like there was.
But it was
fire.
soft soil. They just had that tilled up. It was really nice and padded. It came in perfectly.
Tell me that the power of that makeout in that makeshift web that you're not getting stuck all over, you're able to roll around and make out in.
And of all the people for it to land next to Spider-Man?
Yeah, right. Nothing.
Do we live in a world of coincidences? Because it seems like Spider-Man saves the same lady every day. Maybe we should follow her to find out who Spider-Man is.
Right?
No, because nobody pays attention.
The on again, off again, like friend zoning, which is basically what it is. Like the first movie ends with, "Is that all I am to you? Just a friend?" He's like, "That's all you can be," or blah blah blah, and then walks off. And then she's leaving her wedding. And if you want us to care that there's a wedding, show like an ounce of chemistry instead of like Mary Jane. I talked about how unlikable Peter Parker is. I despise Mary Jane in this franchise because she has no morality or self-confidence. I understand she came from like a rough upbringing, but the way she like bounces around between guys, she does not seem to have any value in herself. And I was like, that's not attractive. And
Jerry's in here saying it, like the constant cheating from Mary Jane was too melodramatic. And like,
she's either cheating on Peter, she's cheating on Harry, she's cheating on J. Jonah's son, and she's just bouncing around. Hi, here's a cattail.
Hi, kitty.
Sir.
Is Mary Jane the real villain of it all?
Yikes. Infidelity is the
boy. She doesn't help Peter out at all.
No.
If there's anything to cause Peter more problems emotionally about who he is and his identity and what he wants in life, Mary Jane is heaping coals onto that fire of causing problems. And what's awesome is and again, I don't want to get too comparison-y, but the way they used MJ in the newer trilogy or newer series versus how they used MJ. And Kirsten Dunst is a good actress, but again, she falls flat in a lot of these scenes, and it's sad because tons of potential there, but emotionally it just doesn't connect at all. If anything, it makes it uncomfortable. Their interactions are super forced.
If we're talking about adaptation, Mary Jane in the comics is supposed to be, whether you like her or not, not that, comics are everything. You can make it adaptations, but it's like she's nothing. Like they dyed her hair red, and that's it. Mary Jane is supposed to be so full of high energy. She's full of herself. She is the most confident love interest that Peter's ever had. And she brings him up in that, is that she shares her confidence with him, and it brings the best out of both of them. This Mary Jane is not.
She brings out the worst.
Yeah.
Like, again, you go through this whole thing where like he loses his powers, and then all of a sudden they come back because now Mary Jane's in trouble. It's like, but he loses his powers because Mary Jane didn't want to be with him to begin with. And it's like I mean, it'd be the only reason, like the number one thing. And that like 45 minutes of that 2-hour flick is probably the most problematic 45 minutes I've seen in film.
Yeah, lots of issues.
Problematic Peter Parker. It's my favorite use of alliteration.
Say that 5 times fast.
We did. We did get through all of our main topics here and stuff. We ran over an hour, which I was like, oh, this will probably be like 40 minutes, but that's it's okay. We're all here for it. I appreciate everyone in the comments section adding in on here and stuff, and everyone being part of the conversation. Is there anything that you guys wanted to get off your chest or say about this trilogy before we ramp up for doing Andrew Garfield next week?
I am now I will say I am a Spider-Man 2 believer, but not super fan. So I'm a tweener now, if we think about it. I can understand why people have such high regard for it, but I can also understand the opposite side of it, where there's people who say it's overrated and terrible. So this is probably like the one divisive thing with this film that I could say is like, I can get both sides coming from the standpoint of I like certain aspects of it, but because of the conversations I've had over it, I can see where the love of it can be. Do I think it holds up as the greatest comic book movie of all time? Absolutely not. That's always going to be Captain America and the Winter Soldier. But,
it's way up there.
It's in my top 3, so I will accept your number 1.
But I do think but if we're going back again on the time frame, because again, I did the research on all the movies that came out right around then, for what we were given and what Marvel was trying to do and what all these other comic books were trying to do, I can see where nostalgia can overshadow people's feelings on it.
It's so responsible for what we have also.
Yes.
So I have to be grateful and thankful for it. And I'm kind of in the same line where like, I like the movie. I enjoy watching the movie, but at the same time, I don't have it way up there. People talk about being the greatest of all time. I really do. If you hand me the trilogy and you're like, hey, you want to watch a Spider-Man movie? I think maybe it's just Willem Dafoe's performance, but I will always go watch the first movie, the Bonesaw stuff. The Uncle Ben and Aunt May are so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that like doesn't offend me about the first one outside of like organic web shooters and some dialogue. But I feel like the more they lean into the romance, into the Mary Jane, the more uncomfortable it gets. And I feel like the first one leaned into it the least because it was kind of like, setting it up and getting there. So that's really my thoughts. Scott's thoughts on the Tobey trilogy, the Tobilogy.
Nostalgia warps perception because we see something when we're younger and we remember a lot of things fondly that don't stand the test of time. I do think of the 3, 2 stands better than the first and the third. But if you were to offer me 1 or 2 to watch, I'd have a hard time choosing which one I want to watch. If somebody handed me those 2 movies, said pick one tonight, I could watch either one of them. If somebody handed me 3 and literally almost any other movie, I'd say let's give the other thing a shot. So I had to rewatch. I've seen the first and the second movie hundreds of times because when I was a manager for Fred Meyer, department store in the Northwest, ran the electronics department. We ran those movies on a loop in the back of the department, right? I've seen them hundreds of times. Number 3, I watched one time and then shelved that mentally because I didn't need it again. So last night when I watched it, I was like, I have to see this to make sure it's fresh in my brain, how he came about, all these things. And when I was watching, I was like, there's a reason I didn't watch this a bunch of times.
Jesse made the right choice to go see Encanto.
Oh, totally. Yeah. You did not miss out by not rewatching this movie.
What a beautiful transition, because everyone got to watch all 3 movies, and I said I got through 2, and I was running out of time. And last night I was faced with the decision: do I go out to the theaters and watch Encanto or Spider-Man 3? I made the choice to see Encanto, and I'm glad you bring that up because approximately 40 minutes from now, my review for Encanto will be going live on this channel. Don't miss it. It's about 10 minutes long. And I share my thoughts there and let you know if it's something that you should go out and see. So stay tuned.
Call me queen. Call me queen of the segue.
Yeah, just one last thing on it, and not to go backward too far, but I will say I am grateful for the Tobey-Verse because it opened the door for everything we have now. Mm-hmm. We were talking about it earlier. In 2007 is when Spider-Man 3 came out. Iron Man was 2008. 2009, we had a Hulk, or I guess '08 was also the Incredible Hulk. And then 2009, Disney buys Marvel, and now we have what we have. If it hadn't been for Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire and what they did, what Sam Raimi did, we may never have had everything that is now laid at our feet. And so I'm grateful, even though not all of it is perfect. It is, and I will echo your sentiments, it is by no means the best comic book adaptation or superhero movie that's ever been made. Was it when it came out? There was a debate at that point in time. Is it now? No.
Well, because you also had Eric Bana's Hulk come out at the same time. We all know how well that one.
2003.
I showed my kids the trailer for Ang Lee's Hulk, and I was like, so my son made a comment in Spider-Man 3 about him swooping through the city, that the scaling was really weird because he was bigger and then smaller and then bigger, and it was really the size proportion. And then I showed him the trailer for Ang Lee's Hulk, and I'm like, you want to see a scale issue? Here's Hulk at 8 feet. Here's Hulk at 15 feet. Here's Hulk at 40 feet. Pick your poison with how big Hulk is in each one of these scenes. And my son's like, what is going on? I'm like, we don't have enough time. But just know this movie is not canon in any universe.
I do agree with so many things that Scott are saying. Sometimes we look back on things with nostalgia with rose-tinted glasses, and then we get to look back and get some clarity with it. So I hadn't used that one yet. I was looking for a segue.
No, really though, our childhood, sometimes we'll see movies. We talked about it last week with Willow. They're coming out with the new Willow series. As a kid, I loved Willow. That movie is terrible, and I still love it, but it's not good. I can rewatch it and find entertainment value in the same way that I can watch Spider-Man 3 and find entertainment value. But I know, as a 40-year-old man watching movies who understands movies a little bit better now, that it's crap, and that's okay.
And it's okay.
All right, for those of you still in the chat or watching this on replay, our next video will be about the Andrew Garfield duology. I don't know what you would call that, but The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2, aptly named.
Paul Giamatti did not get a fair shot to be Rhino. I'm just saying.
Paul Giamatti.
I love
Thomas Hayden Church. Watch Sideways.
Suit.
Great movie.
Yeah.
But Paul Giamatti, so underrated as an actor. Even though he's won an Academy Award, he's so good. He movies might be bad, but he's not bad in them. He's always
big fat liar to me.
Still good in that
Frankie
role.
Muniz. Oh man.
He was in one of the Sharknado movies, believe it or not.
He's literally
everywhere. Good for him. He really peaked, huh?
So anyway, Andrew Garfield will not be Saturday because I will be at the Schmodown Spectacular. Now it is still being determined whether or not the next Spider-Verse movie will be live or not. I got to figure that out, but that'll be coming next week sometime. And then the following Saturday, if you're looking at your calendar, you can figure out what date that is. We'll be talking about Tom Holland's portrayal throughout the MCU leading up to No Way Home. And that one will again be same time as this Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Look forward to that. Again, Encanto video dropping just about half hour or so on this channel. So set your alarm, stay tuned. It's never too early to go like that video and get in the comment section. But I have to say a huge thank you to everyone that co-hosted this with me. Scott Fox, thank you so much. Allison Salamoni. I don't know why I like emphasis on Salamoni, but I think that's how I gotta say it.
It's a fun name to say. It's why I decided to start dating my husband to begin with. He has a fun last name.
Well, that's what who doesn't want this last name? I mean, Swift. And then you can be associated with Taylor Swift your whole last.
Very cool. Are you related?
I wish I would probably have a lot more viewers on this channel. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Until next time, we greatly enjoyed having you. And just remember, with great power comes great responsibility, and to, of course, keep it real.